FAR.F3.M6.
So, Jenna, today we're wrapping up the assets unit with something that sounds intimidating, but is actually pretty logical once you see the pattern. Intangible assets with finite lives. Every time I hear intangible, my brain wants to ask if I can't touch it. Why am I paying millions of dollars for it?
That's actually the perfect question, Russell. An intangible asset isn't valuable because you can hold it. It's valuable because it gives a business legal rights or a competitive advantage. Think patents, copyrights, trademarks, software, franchise rights, and certain cloud computing implementation costs. The key is that they create future economic benefits, even though they're not physical.
So instead of buying a machine that makes products, you're buying something that gives you permission, protection, or an advantage.
Exactly. That's the mental model I want everyone to keep through this entire episode. Tangible assets help you because of what they physically do. Intangible assets help you because of the rights they provide.
I like that. One lifts boxes, the other protects ideas.
Perfect. Just remember that even though they're different kinds of assets, many of the accounting questions are surprisingly similar.
Meaning?
Whenever you see an intangible asset, the CPA exam wants you asking the same sequence of questions. First, was it purchased? Second, should it be capitalized or expensed? Third, if it's capitalized, how long do we amortize it? Fourth, does it need an impairment test? If you naturally ask those 4 questions, you'll solve most problems in this module.
That's interesting because the exam isn't really asking, what is this asset? It's asking, what accounting path does this asset follow?
Exactly.
Let's start with purchased intangible assets.
Becker says purchased identifiable intangible assets are recorded at cost, plus any additional expenditures necessary to acquire them. That should sound familiar because it's the same historical cost principle you've already used for inventory and property, plant, and equipment.
So, if buying the asset requires certain costs just to get ownership, those become part of the asset instead of an immediate expense.
Right. Don't overcomplicate it. If the expenditure is necessary to obtain the asset, it generally becomes part of its recorded cost.
Here's an analogy. Buying a patent is like buying a house. You don't just pay the seller. There are closing costs and legal work required before you officially own it.
That's a useful comparison. Just remember the analogy stops there. Because unlike a house, an intangible asset usually doesn't wear out physically. Instead, its value changes because the legal rights or economic benefits eventually expire.
Which brings us to amortization. Basically depreciation's quieter cousin.
Exactly. Physical assets are depreciated. Finite-lived intangible assets are amortized. Same overall idea. You're systematically allocating cost over the period the asset provides benefits.
And Becker gives us an important rule. We amortize over the shorter of the legal life or the economic life.
That rule is worth repeating because it's one of the most testable ideas in this module. Suppose a patent legally lasts 20 years, but technology will probably make it obsolete in 12. You don't amortize for 20 years. You use 12 because that's how long the economic benefits are expected to exist.
So legal life is the ceiling. Economic usefulness can shorten it.
Exactly. The accounting follows the expected benefit, not necessarily the maximum legal protection.
That actually makes sense. Accounting keeps asking one question over and over. When will this asset stop helping the company? Not when does the paperwork expire?
That's exactly the perspective you want.
Now, here's something students confuse. Finite-lived versus indefinite-lived. Those sound almost philosophical.
They do, but think of it this way. Finite means you already expect the benefits to end. Indefinite means you cannot currently determine when they'll end. That doesn't mean forever. It simply means no predictable ending exists today.
So, indefinite isn't infinite. It's uncertain.
Exactly. That distinction matters because Becker's module focuses on finite-lived assets, which are amortized.
Now, let's talk impairment. Because apparently accounting never trusts that assets will stay valuable forever.
That's true. Becker explains that finite-lived, intangible assets are tested for impairment whenever events or changes in circumstances indicate the carrying amount may not be recoverable. Notice the wording, not every year automatically. Only when something signals a possible problem.
That's another pattern we've already seen with long-lived assets. Something changes. Maybe technology changes. Maybe demand disappears. Maybe regulations change. Then accounting says, let's see whether this asset is still worth what we're carrying it for.
Exactly. The trigger comes first. The impairment analysis comes second.
Let's shift into software because that's become much more important.
Purchased software used internally is generally treated as an intangible asset. Becker says it's recorded as an intangible asset and amortized over the shorter of its legal life or economic life. Again, notice how the same framework keeps appearing. Capitalize, then amortize.
The exam writers love reusing decision frameworks. Different asset, same logic.
Exactly. If you recognize the framework instead of memorizing isolated rules, questions become much easier.
Now, cloud computing arrangements. These feel newer than the rest of this chapter.
They are. Cloud computing arrangements involve paying a vendor for the right to use software over the internet. The important Becker distinction is implementation costs. Certain implementation costs incurred during the application development phase may be capitalized and amortized over the hosting arrangement. Other costs are simply expensed as incurred.
So, not every dollar spent on a cloud project becomes an asset.
Correct. That's exactly where students get trapped. The exam often wants to know whether you're looking at a capitalizable implementation cost or an ordinary operating cost.
Here's my analogy. Imagine renovating a rented office. Some work creates lasting value for using the space. Other spending is just paying the monthly utilities. They're both related to the office, but only one creates something with future benefit.
That's a helpful way to separate them. Just remember, Becker specifically points to implementation costs during the application development phase as the potential capitalization point. Timing matters.
Now, franchise accounting. I think people sometimes overthink this.
They do. Becker keeps it straightforward. The present value of the amount paid, or to be paid, by a franchisee for the initial franchise fee is recorded as an intangible asset and amortized over the expected period of benefit.
So again, capitalize, future benefit, amortize. It's becoming almost repetitive.
And that's actually good news. The CPA exam often rewards recognizing repeated accounting patterns.
Then we get to startup costs. These always feel a little unfair. Companies spend money preparing to earn revenue, yet accounting says nope.
That's because Becker makes the rule very clear. In financial accounting, startup costs are expensed as incurred. Don't capitalize them.
I can already imagine exam writers pairing those with franchise fees. One gets capitalized. One gets expensed.
Exactly. Those comparison questions are extremely common. The exam likes situations where two expenditures sound similar but receive different accounting treatment.
Now, let's touch on crypto assets because Becker includes them here.
Crypto assets represent a digital value or right and are classified as intangible assets. Under the conditions described in Becker, they may qualify as indefinite-lived intangible assets, and if those conditions are met, they're recognized at fair value each reporting period. The important point for this episode isn't memorizing every possible rule outside the module. It's recognizing how Becker classifies them and where they fit within the broader intangible asset framework.
So don't panic if you hear crypto. Instead ask, how is Becker telling me to classify it?
Exactly. Always let the module drive your answer.
Let's zoom back out. I think there's a bigger picture here. We've spent several modules learning about assets, cash, receivables, inventory, PP&E, now intangibles. They're all different, but accounting keeps asking remarkably similar questions.
That's exactly the mental map. Can it be recognized? At what amount? Does it stay on the balance sheet? Do we allocate its cost over time? Has something happened that changes its value? Different assets answer those questions differently, but the questions themselves barely change.
That's actually comforting. Instead of memorizing 50 disconnected rules, you're learning one decision tree that keeps getting reused.
Exactly. Let's finish with some rapid-fire distinctions, because these are easy exam traps. Purchased identifiable intangible asset? Capitalize.
Startup costs. Expense immediately.
Finite-lived intangible? Amortize.
Amortization period. Shorter of legal life or economic life.
Possible impairment? Test when events indicate the carrying amount may not be recoverable.
Purchase software. Generally capitalize and amortize.
Cloud computing arrangement? Separate implementation costs that may qualify for capitalization from other costs that are expensed.
Initial franchise fee. Capitalize as an intangible asset and amortize over the expected benefit period.
Exactly. If those distinctions feel natural, you've captured the heart of Module 6.
My biggest takeaway isn't actually a specific rule. It's the mindset. Every intangible asset starts with one question. What future right or benefit did the company actually buy? Once you answer that, the accounting becomes much more predictable.
That's the perfect ending. Don't memorize isolated journal entries. Build the decision framework. Identify the future benefit. Decide whether the expenditure creates an asset or an expense. If it's an asset, determine whether it's finite-lived. Then ask how it's amortized and whether impairment needs to be considered. That sequence will carry you through most FAR questions on this topic far more reliably than memorizing exceptions.
And with that, we've completed FAR.F3.M6. More importantly, we've finished building another piece of the asset framework that the FAR exam keeps returning to from different angles.